We're joined today on the bridge by Courting, who have a new album coming out called Guitar Music. It's out September 23rd, and it's going to be out on vinyl, CD, and cassette, which is just about as cool as it can possibly be. Thanks for joining us today, guys. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
So, up until now, well, let's start off with the question that I'm sure you get a lot. Courting is actually a name that came from, was it your grandmother, Sean?
Yeah, it's kind of one of them. Like when we were trying to pick a band name, we just kind of had a list of words, and like one of them happened to be this, and I guess it kind of struck. Not specifically, it was more. It came from she said it a lot, so I just thought it would make a cool band name rather than it was fully inspired by her. But I think it's a specifically British, a very British thing. I don't know, but like a lot of like older grandparents tend to constantly ask,
"Are you courting?
If you're courting, are you courting anyone? Are you courting?" And it wasn't specifically named to like joke in with that, so that we are technically courting, but more just like I thought it sounded really cool, and she's very happy about it.
Yeah, does she like the music?
I don't think she really knows what's going on in it, but I think she's cool with it.
She's down with the fact that you are having success.
Yeah, she likes it, definitely. I think she feels some personal responsibility, so she's got a stake in there, so she's glad about it. But I think she likes it as much as a grandmother could like loud music.
Yeah, there you go. So the band has got sort of it came together over time. Some of you go back to being childhood friends, but it really coalesced in college.
Yeah, it's kind of it has came over time, because like originally we all met when we were like 18, and then people have left. Me and Josh went to university together, as did our bassist Connor, and our drummer, me and Sean, we met when we were younger in college. But it's took a while to get here.
Yeah. So the earlier projects that you've done have all been EPs, but they've been a little bit different because you guys have sort of approached them as being, projects, more like an album would be, as opposed to like a collection of songs. So in a way, you've got a head start on putting out your first full length. But was that daunting in any way to all of a sudden think, that this is going to be the length of, maybe 2, 3, 4 EPs?
Not particularly, because I think the fun of an album is you got a lot more to work with. And I think for us, when we're writing songs, we're often thinking about what the song is accomplishing in context rather than just on its own. And obviously when you're writing an EP, maybe you've got 4 songs to play with. But when you can double that and have like 30 minutes of time to kind of play with what the different songs' roles will be and how they'll form a whole experience, I think that makes a more interesting challenge. I think that's why we approached the EP like that in the first place, because it's like to see something as a body of work rather than just a greatest hits or a playlist. Like it's important to us to have like some flow in there. So it felt like a good challenge.
It must be weird to, have started to get some traction during the pandemic when you really couldn't do the normal things that people do when they start to get some traction. Couldn't play out live. But I think you used the time pretty well, right?
Yeah. We just wrote the whole time. I remember in the first lockdown in Britain, when we finished recording the EP, when that was allowed, I remember like we started writing the album like the day after, just because we had nothing to do. We wanted to kind of get stuff done. The album took maybe like a year after that to complete writing and some production. But yeah, I think it kind of came together well. It came together in good time. It was nice having the time to work on it, because I think a lot of bands are maybe rushed into making a debut album that they're not fully proud of, because it's like you've maybe released a few really good singles, you've been picked up on like a large tour, and now the music industry wants you to generate 12 tracks of 12 like consistent good songs in like a month. And we've had like a bit more time to make something that we're a bit proud of.
So, one of the things that, and feel free to tell me that I'm way off base here, but it felt to me like that time helped you sort of coalesce around who you all are as a band and find yourself a little bit, which is also sort of interesting and ironic in a way, because I feel like the band is dedicated to constantly changing who you are.
Yeah. I guess it gave us a bit of time to kind of have like an ethos to how we want to do it and work out how we would keep going forward and what kind of music we wanted to make for this album. But in the same way, in the time between finishing that album and what we're doing now, we can kind of reassess what that was and what we want to do next. So I think it is always changing, but it definitely gave us time to think what we wanted to do for that project.
We're talking about the new album, Guitar Music, which is out September 23rd with members of the Courting, Sean and Josh. And, this time around, you were joined by James Dring, who has produced for the Gorillaz, Lana Del Rey, Blur. So I'm assuming that it was a little bit different recording process this time around.
Yeah, to an extent, because interestingly, we tracked the record here in Liverpool with Rob, who produced our debut EP, and every song we've ever worked on has been recorded with him in some extent. Because James works more kind of technologically, and obviously space in London is maybe a little bit more limited. You can't have some massive live room. We thought it made sense to kind of make the album as we would have recorded everything, because we had like a system that worked. So we went in with Rob and tracked the 8 songs, and then once it was all finished, but like without vocals, but we had everything that needed to be recorded live. Loads more than we needed, to be honest. Just kind of ideas thrown around. We went down with James and then kind of ripped it to pieces and then saw how we can reassemble it in a way that's much more interesting and is like purposeful for what we want.
I read a quote from you saying that this one was more emotional, that you weren't hiding this time around. So, of course, which begs the question, what have you been hiding in the past?
I think like as a songwriter, especially like with a lot of music that's like punky post-punk stuff that maybe you listen to when you're like 16 and 17, a lot of bands try and just keep their lyrical themes tied into things that they're not really bothered about, and I think that creates kind of like an interesting effect. And I'd say like the same, like I've definitely wrote songs where people are like, oh yeah, he feels really strongly about this thing. I'm like, well, I don't actually. It was just like a good way to write a song. And I think a lot of songwriters do that, because writing a more personal or a more like affecting song without it coming across as like naive or like cringeworthy is very difficult. So I think a lot of bands hide behind like obvious political lyrics that don't really provide any insights, or just talking about kind of nonsense to cover up the fact that they aren't very good at writing personal songs, because it is really hard. So it's kind of the challenge for us was to spend more time making lyrics that, I'm not saying they're necessarily like really sensical or like storytelling, but at least have more personality in like an emotional way rather than like a political or a kind of more abstract way.
I just can't stomach it. Post-modern, voyeuristic. There are 7 items hidden in my glove compartment. Once a liar, always headed to a lordship title. I'm the wiser and I'm just trying to ignore his sunshine. Yeah, somewhere in the northern quarter, I picture piles of money just falling from the sky. Oh, I'm the princess in your emails. Take action quickly, please. No credit cards required. And I am not your baby. Don't wanna be a pop star now. Maybe I'll think about it later. Maybe I'll think about it. These cities are so strange, these people are so wild. Flash share well furnished 4 apartments in North London. And if you think I'm fake, well then you're probably right. Prende fuego, to dinero, para verme, verme. So as these car parks get demolished into car parks, well, let's think of all the places we could park when we were younger, man. People don't do drugs anymore. We sit around praying for money and oncoming traffic. We don't do anything drastic. There are people that live here, buildings without feeling, identical and soulless. Well, it's just a laugh. No, you've been using that word wrong the whole time. he didn't even tell you. 'Cause I am not your baby. Don't wanna be a pop star now. Maybe I'll think about it later. Maybe I'll think about it later. These cities are so strange, these people are so wild. We're furnished for apartments in North London. And if you think I'm fake, then you're probably right. Prende fuego to the narrow paradise. These cities are so strange, these people are so wild. I share well furnished for apartments in North London. And if you think I'm fake, well then you're probably right. Prende fuego to the narrow paradise.
Our guests today on the bridge are Sean and Josh from Courting. Their new album, Guitar Music, is out September 23rd. And I want to pick up that thread that we were just talking about, about songwriting and the lyrics. And you have experimented in the past with writing from a viewpoint that you don't even agree with.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. I think when I'm talking about political songs, that kind of sounded like I was saying it's kind of like easy to write political songs. I think there's a similar challenge there where it's hard to write a good political song. And I think that's why a lot of bands that try and do this come across as a little bit shallow. But the technique there for me was inspired by the band Country Teasers on a slight level, because I think their lead singer at one point stated something along the lines of like, how can you make someone like question their beliefs if all you do is like just dramatically argue against them and tell them they're wrong? If you can like also almost make a caricature of how like ridiculous what they believe is, then you can kind of maybe make people like rationalize another side of an argument a bit better. And I also think it's just interesting from like a writing perspective to kind of make characters out of people you don't necessarily agree with, rather than just kind of preaching, because I think a lot of bands who are just kind of aggressively preach, people will just it's kind of like you're preaching to the choir, I guess. You're not actually approaching people who have oppositional viewpoints to you.
It's always interesting to me to talk about the songwriting process, because there's this huge trap that when you're writing a song, you approach every song in the exact same way and handle it the exact same way. And I just don't get that feeling with you all at all. One of the things that fascinated me was the concept of lyrics almost being like found objects that you store away and then create almost a mosaic of lyrical bits that you might have found over a period of a long period of time.
That's something that was kind of very instrumental in how this album was wrote, to be honest. A lot of it came over a long period of time. There were songs that we wrote and then got rid of and kind of scrapped for parts. And I think with like risk of sounding particularly pretentious, somehow I feel like when you write a song like that, at the end it does tend to make sense, even if all the threads, even if like where you're writing from is all pulling from like different threads. In the end, for some reason, it just kind of fits together, and I always find that really satisfying when like you've had a song in the works for maybe like 3 or 4 months, and then there'll be a line that comes along and like suddenly it is a thing now.
You've mentioned in the past that sometimes you figure out what the song means after it's finished. It kind of mirrors that thing where and I think that there's really sort of like people sort of break one way or the other. Either you write a song because you're trying to say something very specific and you really want people to understand that specific thing, but you embrace the other school, which is that you really expect the listener to finish the song in the hearing of it.
I think there's kind of like a little bit of a mix of both. I think it's good to let the listener decide what you're talking about, but then also like as an artist, I find it very interesting to kind of means something even if you're not quite sure what it means until you do it. Like usually when I approach writing a song, I think I'll pick like a kind of atmosphere or vibe that I'm trying to curate. And for some reason, there's like a lot of intuition involved, and sometimes it'll feel like a lyric's right, even if I don't quite understand. I was thinking, oh, that makes sense. And then later on, I'll probably realize why I did that. And if there's like people listening who piece that together in a different way, then that is how it is. Like, but I also always think it's like interesting to see how people piece it together. And then sometimes as an artist, even be like, well, that's kind of wrong, even though it's not really my position to do that, but be like, well.
You know, I'm going to test you a little bit on this. You got some traction with David Byrne's Bad Side, a song from a while back. And so if David Byrne hears that song as a listener, how would you like him to finish it in his head? What would you like him to feel from that song?
When we released that song, we actually sent him an email and we were like, here's a song. We are not like slandering you in this song. It is like a, we're referencing it a different way. If you hear this, please don't think we're poking fun at you. I really hope he wouldn't read it in a way that we were making out that he was the
well, you referred to him as like the protagonist of the song.
Yeah, of course. Like to be honest, like those threads, like that was kind of writing in a completely different way to how we write now. And it was almost just a little bit nonsensical in the fact that I just thought that was a really funny name for a song. And then I kind of did the thing I've just criticized before, where it's like, I thought, oh, well, what do I have to write a song about now? How can I write 3 minutes on like Psycho Killer? And I was like, oh, well, I guess I'll just relate it to another topic. And I think in hindsight, maybe that does kind of mumble up the intention of the song a bit, which I think is something we are more airtight on now. But yeah, I think it's quite interesting.
Bank account, double glaze in the summer house, a wristwatch kickback, luxury furnishing. Did we all take it a bit too far? You said you like me in cricket whites, but what would your dad think? Well, tell me, would you find me attractive if I had smaller muscles? It's just a questionnaire. I'm not a guest house. There is trade involved, there is trade involved, there is trade involved. I'm paying you to love me. I've been playing ball. The first song. Just playing tennis. Just playing tennis. Just playing tennis. Just playing tennis. I'm not some piggy bank. You can't just piggyback off me. There's trade involved. I was paying you to love me. Yeah, I've been paying you, and I'm in great shape. And the grass, it's always greener in the country house. I've got a celebratory blue wig with stripes down the side. You're the bride in the Holiday Inn. I'm a breakfast bar than usual. Toasting conveyor belt, this is not your name. You don't own it. We can't share it anymore. I've grown up so much since Tuesday, and I can count the hairs on my chest now. All the best to the sleigh bell operator, but I can go at it alone. This is a solo project now, and the hits, well, they're stronger for it. I've been playing ball for over a year. I've been playing ball for just over a year. I've been playing tennis. Just 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 playing tennis.
Our guests today on the bridge are Sean and Josh from Courting. The new album, Guitar Music, is out on September 23rd. I wanted to talk to you about your latest track, Tennis. This sort of is, you've referred to it as like a 3-song series about sports.
Yeah, it kind of started as a joke.
Yeah.
But then people kept just suggesting that we name more songs after sports. And I thought, well, we've kind of got to end it somewhere. So this is the logical ending point of that joke, because it was completely unintentional, to be honest. With Grand National, I didn't really realise the reference to football until after we'd done it. And then I was like, oh, like we've kind of created a problem here, because people are going to expect everybody to have a sport related song. So we've been stating quite prominently, like, no more after this. And this is so far disconnected from being about sport that I do not think anyone can pull us up on it.
Yeah. Well, and the one that, I mean, some like football is kind of about sports, right? I mean, it's about the national obsession, and I do feel like it's an outsider's viewpoint.
Yeah.
It's not like you guys are out on the pitch.
I think it's more from, to me, like how that sport is seen, maybe particularly in Liverpool, which is where even if you're not like a massive football fan, it's kind of like regardless forced on you a little bit. And kind of me just thinking that is quite weird, and then seeing it both sides. I think football is great, and obviously it's not as if we're like unaware to football or don't watch football. I wouldn't say we're like massive fans as a band. No. But like it's just interesting how it's perceived here. The good and bad of that culture being so omnipresent and kind of pushed on you, even as a kid, is kind of interesting to me.
Yeah. It's always just like, are you a blue or are you a red?
Yeah.
I think it's the same Liverpool as at Sheffield. Like it's always blue or red.
Yeah. It's like when you're like 7 in like primary school, the first thing like anyone will ask you upon like trying to make a friend, and it's like, if you're not interested in football as a child, you like lost social points already. And I think that's like
it's strange.
It's really weird. Yeah. And it's like, as a kid, you're obviously not interested in that much stuff apart from like playing. So it's like, then as an adult you can look back on that and be like, oh well, I'm interested in football now, and people still care, and that's really weird. Like, why does that come before like, or like, where are you from, or like, I don't know. When has anyone ever like started a conversation with like, what music do you like, or like how many times have you been asked like what team you support before someone like knows your surname? It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. So let's talk about a community that you do feel really good about being a part of, the Liverpool music scene, which like there is not really, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not the expert here, but not really like a Liverpool sound.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think when we started out, there definitely was, and it's kind of dissipated over the last few years. There was like really dreamy, poppy, but like kind of to me, in the like the least offensive way I can say it, I felt like a lot of bands were like making like background music, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. There's loads of bands that are incredibly successful at doing that. But I think when we started, it was almost to like oppose that a little bit, because we were like, every gig you go to, it's like very kind of neo shoegaze that isn't really shoegaze, but people trying to like stand still and look really cool, but not fully having the songs to like back that up. Because realistically, like, what 15-16-year-old is going to be able to write like a song that is like really shoegazy and actually have it be good? Because who at 16 is particularly writing good music apart from like a handful of great songwriters? So like, I found everything was a little bit boring, with the exception of some really good bands still who were a little bit older doing like a similar thing. So we wanted to kind of be in the same way of like 16-year-old, 17-year-old bands who aren't very good songwriters. We want to be like, oh, we're angry and forward, and I think we've kind of grown out of that a little bit now, but that's kind of where we were at the start. Whereas now I think there's a lot more like angry forward bands in Liverpool, and I'd like to say that to some extent I hope we kind of pushed on that, because I can't really think of a band in Liverpool that was kind of pushing at the post-punk stuff and also pushing at being like mainstream intentionally in like the last few years before we were, but maybe that's mean. Maybe I'm being too cocky. And not that I think that we deserve credit, but I think we were a little bit ahead of the curve.
So the thing that I think is really interesting about you is like you are who you are. And so you're always going to sound like Courting, but you seem to be inspired by different genres. And when you make your own music, you have really approached it more than anything else as, you know, using mood as an example. You know, what type of attitude musically does this song have as like a launching point?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one exercise that we did before we wrote this album is like genuinely it makes us sound like the most boring band on the planet, but like taking albums you like and effectively doing homework and being like, well, why do I like this album? How long is the album? Why is it structured in this way? What is achieved by putting a 7-minute song as the 4th track or as the 7th track? And then a lot of kind of boring qualitative research where we just kind of worked out why we like stuff and then tried to write songs that would fulfill those goals in what we would consider like a perfect album structure. And I think mood is really important. So like, for example, on the album, like we knew Tennis would be the 2nd track before Tennis was recorded, before Tennis was wrote. I already had the name, I already had what that song should be like. It was just until it came to me. And then like similarly with the 1st track, we were kind of really interested in how albums start and looking at like different like models of how a band can start an album and what is the most successful to us, and then kind of modeling songs that are similar to that. I think that's interesting to approach it from like almost like a bit of a scientific perspective. See like, why do I like stuff? And if I was making an album for me, what would make me like it? And then trying to write it for those gaps.
Yeah, definitely. It's very, I think it's important to like almost look past what genre a song is and kind of strip it back to almost it's like bare bones and kind of say like, well, like you were saying, like what do I like about it specifically that works? And then it's how do you apply that into, you know, the music that you want to make, but almost not emulating the same kind of genre that song is,
but like why it works.
But like why it works, yeah.
Well, and this process that you went through, you were listening to 2 or 3 albums a day.
Yeah. There was the same time, like the start of lockdown, and me and our drummer Sean, we were just talking about how like there were so many classic albums that we hadn't properly engaged with. So we just set aside, like, obviously there's nothing to do, set aside like 2 or 3 hours a day just to like, we made like a massive list of records based on like, you know, high review scores and like aggregate critics like charts, and then like albums that we just knew were like cult classics, and like numbered them, random number generated every night, and picked like 2 or 3 records that we listened to with no bias. So even if we didn't think we'd like it at all, we just had to listen to it, had to sit through it. And like that really informed a lot of not just how the album sounds, but like how we approached it and like the process of why the album exists how it does. Like, for example, we were very conscious of making a record that was like sub 30 minutes. And we didn't succeed with that because it ended up at like 32. But that was very much an intentional thing, because like when we were listening to all these bands for the first time, I think like a debut album is a lot of people's point of exposure to an artist. And if we make some like 1.5 hour double album as a band who aren't ready to do that, with fans who aren't ready to listen to that, people will just get bored halfway. And our thought was, if we can make something really tight with no filler, people are more likely to listen to it and then just put it on again. Because that's what we found we were doing with the albums that we were listening to. Like, if, you know, there's a critically acclaimed band and our first exposure is this 1.5 hour album, even if it's great after a few listens, you're sitting there going like, my God, this is really long. So,
you know, I do think your fan base is ready for more. I mean, they've had listening parties online for like individual songs, like a 3-minute listening party.
Yeah. That was one of our like stupid little marketing tricks. Because a lot of bands during that lockdown were doing like album listening parties to keep the streams up. And we were like, well, we don't have an album. We don't even have an EP. So like, okay, we'll have a listening party for a song that's 2 minutes to kind of mock that process. But also like it worked really well. Like people were into it because of like the kind of like silly aspect to it. So we'd get loads of like a surge of streams, and then I think we pushed it a little bit too close to the sun because we just kept doing them because we needed streams, and then people got bored and were like, oh, that's
Well, you did some really creative things online though. I mean, you live streamed making pancakes.
Yeah.
They are good pancakes.
Yeah, I make really good pancakes.
So are pancakes not a thing in England?
No, that's it.
Yeah. Like
The thing that I read was American pancakes, and I just thought, man, I just was not aware that we owned them.
like crepes, like crepes, like that's what people would refer to as a British pancake, I'd say.
Yeah.
But I know the French. Yeah, so it's really bizarre. So like for some
They're a
reason,
little bit like more bready. They're heavier, I think, than a crepe.
see, yeah, exactly,
Cake,
yeah. And I think like personally, if I think about pancake, I do think more towards like an American style pancake than a crepe. So, well, that's yeah.
You ever had like a Japanese pancake?
No.
They're like really thick and fluffy, like
Oh, like massive,
like cakes, yeah.
Same with the Dutch. There's loads of weird pancakes. I think like I don't know if you said pancake in this country, I think there'd be a split on whether people are picturing like a European crepe or like an American style. It's not be a pancake, but I personally just prefer to cook the fluffy ones.
Yeah. So I think that we're all in agreement that, that the standard that you'll know when you've made it is when somebody gets a courting tattoo. Has anybody taken that step yet? I know that you've gone on the record. So did that inspire anybody to take that step?
I think so. I think we've got 3, and then I've got one there.
Wow.
And then our drummer's got one on his leg. So I think we got 3 courting tattoos that aren't band related. Like 3 of our fans have got them, which is insane, to be honest. Like I think it's, if I like question like the tattoos I have of other bands, and then think like of how much it took me to get that done, and then think of people considering us on that level to do it, I think that's pretty respectable. I'm happy about that.
Yeah. Well, I wish nothing but total success and more band fan tattoos for you all in the future. And congratulations on the new music. What we've heard so far has been really great. Courting's new album, Guitar Music, their debut full length, is out September 23rd on vinyl, CD, and cassette. Sean, Josh, it's been a lot of fun. I really have appreciated the time.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Cheers, so much fun. Thank you for having us. Yeah.
Question the spore, we're all just setting the course, we're all just cracking the whip with some incredible force. Well, that's one hell of a trip, it's not quite justified. I don't care if it dies, it's entertainment. Well, don't call it cruel, divine exploitation, and that's one hell of a quip, not quite justified. And I wouldn't place a bet if you pay me, I'd always end up losing my money on some stupid horse again. I'm not here to make friends, can't you comprehend? It's just not all that grand. We all gather on our artificial lawns and then we discuss the chemtrails and the problems in our schools, and it's not my fault and you can't tell me that I'm wrong. Well, I don't care for anything apart from my returns, and if I get my 401k, what's the harm? Cause I've got to tuck my kid in a new 5-bedroom home, and I don't wanna hear you complain about your loans, you're just not qualified. And I wouldn't place a bet if you paid me, I'd always end up losing my money on some stupid horse again. I'm not here to make friends, can't you comprehend? It's just not all that grand. and this is not my hill to die on. This is not my hill, no.